What's up, everybody? My name is Joe Brown. This is Heresy Financial, and today wanted to talk to you guys about what it's like living under hyperinflation. This isn't hypothetical. I've got a very good friend who lives in Lebanon, and if you're not aware, recently Lebanon just made the #1 spot in the world for its hyperinflation rate. So they passed up Venezuela, passed up Zimbabwe, and so I had a long conversation with him just a couple of nights ago about what day-to-day life is like. I know many of you are concerned about your government's and central bank's monetary and fiscal policy, and nothing in the world right now is like it is in Lebanon. So wanted to share with you guys some insights from that conversation about what it's like living life, just trying to go about your daily life in a time period and in a country when hyperinflation is taking place. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Ready? Let's dive in. All right, guys, just before we jump in here, I want to provide a way for any of you who would like to donate to a charity who's doing really great work in Lebanon. And I'm going to try and attach this charity to the video. I know lots of YouTube videos have done fundraisers in the past. YouTube has some stipulations on which 501c3 nonprofits will be allowed in like the section underneath the video. I'm going to try and get it listed there. If you go down beneath the video, there should be one there. And if there's not, there are plenty of networks, plenty of organizations that are doing really great nonprofit work there, providing jobs and resources to all the people who are hurting. So if you have the capability, if you have the capacity, check out that nonprofit that is linked in the fundraiser section below the video. All right, so it's important to understand some of the background, how Lebanon got into the position that they're in today. And unfortunately, as with everything in history, politics, economics, there's never really anything that you can point to as the real beginning of something, because the only reason that situation was there is because of something that happened before it. But you have to start somewhere, and really the crash in Lebanon in 2019 is kind of when everything really started to spiral out of control. And at that point, you're going to notice throughout some of these things I'm talking about, you're going to notice a lot of parallels to a lot of countries around the world right now, and a lot of places in, times in history when hyperinflation has occurred. And so be looking out for those parallels and those similarities. But Lebanon, the central bank there, had a hard peg from the lira to the dollar. And as you know, with hard pegs, one of the consistencies that happens is that it is stretched a little bit. And so you print a lot more lira than you actually have access to dollars, but you're maintaining a hard peg. Well, that means that the fair value, or the fair value of the currency, the lira that you're printing more of, is different than what the market value is. So the market value is still pegged at that hard peg. But once that breaks, which is inevitable anytime there's fraud, and that's really fraud, you're just saying that you have more than you really do, eventually it breaks, and eventually you get the consequences of that. So they had the hard peg. That was one thing. The other thing that was going on there at the time was most accurately described as a Ponzi scheme. And the definition of a Ponzi scheme is when you have payouts to investors, the dividends or the profits or whatever. You have payouts that are funded only by new investors' money. And that's how Charles Ponzi did it, the original Ponzi scheme. Not the original, but that's who we have it named after today. That's how Bernie Madoff did it, and that's what Social Security is, and that's what the central bank was doing with bank deposits. So their specific Ponzi scheme was they were paying out 10 to 20% interest on bank accounts, and it was denominated in dollars. So this is one of the key differences when you get hard breaks with devastating consequences, is when you have Ponzi schemes denominated in things you can't control the supply of. So this is where it differs from something like Social Security, because ultimately when it comes down to it, the United States government can always cause the Federal Reserve to create more dollars. And so it's different than doing something denominated in a currency you can't control. So that's what Lebanon was doing. They were having dollar bank accounts paying 10 to 20% interest, which is something that is just not possible to earn from their side from business activities or other investments. So they weren't creating those returns behind the scenes with investors' money, but they were still paying that out. So the only way they could pay that out was by getting new investors' money. And so, as is the case with every Ponzi scheme, eventually it breaks because you run out of money to pay out. And the third thing that was going on at the time was, due to the high interest rates, due to the hard peg, there was a false wealth effect. So Lebanon looked a lot more wealthy than everybody else around them in the region, which attracted wealth, just not enough to keep up the facade. And so there was a false wealth effect, and most normal people were kind of caught off guard by this, because it felt like real wealth. And so people were spending money like it was going to continue to come in at really high rates. People were living high on the hog, living wealthily. And again, I wasn't there, so I'm not sure. There you can look at time periods that you were involved in and say, okay, well, there were some smart people that looked at the signs and didn't get caught up in it. And so I don't know exactly how much the average person was able to tell, hey, this is a scam that's going to fall apart. But essentially, that is what happened. Is that you can't keep those things up forever, and everything fell apart. So that happened in 2019 when that started to fall apart. Now, a couple things to note: the people who were on the inside, and whenever you get to this point in an economy and in a country, corruption is just kind of, it's something that's always there. So many people point to the corruption or the bad policies or the ineffectiveness of governments as the reasons for hyperinflation. But every time you see hyperinflation take place, you see lots of things leading up to that point in the country, which it's like kind of like a correlation versus causation thing at that point. It's like, fix the money, and you wouldn't have the government have the ability to not have skin in the game and have the false incentive structures and all those sort of things. Getting a little bit off topic here. So the everything fell apart, and all of the people who were in the know had moved a lot of their money out of the country already. So this was a key breaking point in terms of civil unrest, because when you have all of the well-connected people who had a lot of the money see this coming in advance and see, hey, this is a Ponzi scheme, so I'm going to get my money out first and not tell anybody about it. What they did was they moved their dollars out of the country to other places where they could, still access them, because inside Lebanon, even to this day, it's been 2 years, you still can't access all the dollars from your dollar accounts. They have restrictions on how many dollars you can get out from inside the country. And this is funny, they still haven't changed the hard peg. So officially, if you want to go through the official channels, you're still converting lira to dollars at the old rate. And the parallel market right now, the actual market rate of what people are converting the Lebanese lira and dollars, let me double check. I believe it's 18,000. This was as of 12 hours ago, as of the time of this recording, about 18,000 to 1 as of today. The official rate is 1,500 to 1. And so that means if you want to get your hands on $1, one US dollar, or I'm sorry, if you want to convert $1 to lira, you should be able to get 18,000 lira. But if you want to get your hands on that through the official channels, you'll only be able to get your hands on 1,500 lira. So it'll cost you far more in dollars to go through official channels to get your hands on lira. And we're going to come back to in a moment to why that's important. So it's very difficult to get your hands on dollars in Lebanon. And whenever you have something like this going on, everybody's going to go to the easiest, strongest currency. So euros, easy, that's, dollars, great. And so, I was asking him on the ground level, just day-to-day people, is there any leaning towards, because this has happened in other countries, is the average person kind of trying to go towards Bitcoin or go towards gold or silver or anything else? And it's like, no, people are just going towards the easiest, hardest currency. And relative to the lira, the dollar's pretty hard. And so, but I asked him about some prices and things. And let me see if I wrote down. Okay. So a year ago, for a 6-pack of sparkling water, it was less than $1. And I don't remember what that converted to in terms of lira, but it was, I believe it was about, believe it was about 6,000 or 8,000 lira. And then as of today, it's about $2 for the same 6-pack of sparkling water. And so that was like 36,000 lira. And the dollars are for sure correct there. I might be wrong on the conversion to lira. But essentially, what I noticed there when he let me know about that was things have gotten a lot more expensive in terms of lira, right? And they've still gotten more expensive in terms of dollars. So this is the, kind of the relative, you talk about, there's a lot of inflation happening with dollar users right now, nowhere near the inflation that you'd experience if you're holding lira, if you're in Lebanon, but things are still getting more expensive, even for dollars. But you'd still rather, get your hands on dollars because it's a lot more stable in Lebanon than lira. So the thing that sparked this was obviously that the spark of everything really spiraling out of control was when the hard peg, when the Ponzi scheme collapsed and things like that. And the key to note here is that the hard peg, it wasn't backed up, right? So you see this happen all the time. This was Weimar Republic in Germany. This was the gold that the U.S. was supposedly holding for all of the redeemable dollars that were in circulation around the world. And everybody then realized, hey, there's probably not enough gold, so I'm going to go get my gold with my dollars because they said we could do that. And that was the promise. And there wasn't enough gold. And so the U.S. said, no, dollars are no longer redeemable for gold. Now the other thing that happened then in 2020 was that Lebanon defaulted on euro bonds. So this is another thing that's important. When you start to abuse your currency as a country, what happens is other countries don't want to mess with your currency anymore. It takes a while for that to happen, and there's other factors involved, but basically, the more you abuse your currency, the less other countries want to deal in it because the risk of not having the purchasing power be there when they go to use that currency for something else, even if it's converting it to a different currency after that, is too high. And so other countries will just want to deal in other currencies instead. And so this is why they had euro bonds, because other countries don't want to loan money to Lebanon that's denominated in lira because they can just create new lira and pay it back. And that will have, at this point, a direct effect on the purchasing power immediately of those lira that they're paying back. And so another country is not gonna do that. So in order to loan money, they're going to loan it in euros or they're going to loan it in dollars because Lebanon can't do anything to change the value of those of currencies that they can't control. And if they continue to abuse their own currency, it only makes it harder for them to get their hands on the dollar or the euro in order to pay that back. And so countries then will loan in other currencies. So America, I'll loan in dollars to Lebanon because then there's a built-in incentive with Lebanon to not abuse their currency, at least until they've been able to pay me back. Otherwise, it makes it more and more difficult to pay me back. Now, many people, and I don't want to get into the politics of it at all because, to be honest, I don't know much about the politics there. But I do know that many people look at the ineffective government or the lack of government. There's been battles on who controls government. And relatively recently, a government got established by a billionaire there who's been in government there for a long time. So that has been something that people have looked at, has been like, good, we finally have, a government that is, at least lasted this long. And so it's like a bad system is better than a continually changing and unpredictable system. Now, so that's important because the IMF has money waiting to go into Lebanon. But they need two things to happen. Number one, they need a government established. Number two, they need to audit the central bank. And to this point, nothing has changed, even though the government is established. They haven't done anything, and the central bank will not allow an audit. And so it's kind of telling that a central bank won't allow an audit. Means that they've got something to hide, and so they're probably still trying to bail themselves out of this problem. One indication of that is that UN money, aid money, that has been going in to help the citizens that need money and need supplies and need food and all of that, has been going, it's a lot of money, so it has to go through official channels. Well, remember what I said earlier about money going through official channels, like through the central bank into Lebanon. They have been operating at the hard peg from 2 years ago. That's not the parallel rate. And so they've been able to, I believe the number is $250 million. The central bank has been able to skim $250 million off the top because they're converting it at the old rate. And so there hasn't been, all the money that's been going in to help people hasn't been getting to the people. And so when I mentioned the official channels and why they're still maintaining that hard peg, looks to me, I could be wrong, but it looks to me like they're still trying to dig themselves out of the hole that they put themselves in, and then they're maybe optimistically thinking they can dig themselves out, get enough dollars to fix it, and then let the audit happen so that they can get the IMF to come in and bring in some real assistance. So that's what's been going on from a system point of view. Now, down to the nitty gritty of what it's like to live under this. I mentioned the cost of sparkling water, right? And so one of the things that starts to happen is people just slowly but surely stop accepting the deteriorating currency. So there are a lot of little markets or little things, like he said he has to go, take his car in to get something fixed. They're not accepting lira to fix cars. They're only accepting dollars. This is different than something like when you go to a school, like a government run school, or anything that is through government channels at all. It's still all denominated in lira. And so a problem with this is that people who have salaries that are tied into any official channels, they have not been getting pay raises to keep pace with the hyperinflation. So you have tons of people who are getting paid where the minimum wage there is the equivalent of here in America $50 a month. And so clearly that's not enough to live on, and the reason why is because it hasn't been they haven't had salary raises in order to compensate for the hyperinflation that's been taking place. And so one of the ways that people have been able to just continue living, number one, is there are probably still some people who are living off of some of the savings and some of the wealth that they were able to accumulate during the false boom that preceded the crash. The second way, and this is even bigger, my friend was telling me in his building, out of 5 families, he's the only dad in the building, which is very sad. All of the other dads have had to leave the country, and they've found jobs in the region, and they're having to send money back. And so this is the main way, and you see this time and time again. Right, same exact thing happened in Venezuela. It's probably still happening there, where you have the people who have the capability to earn and to work. They're leaving the country and sending money back in order to allow their families to have enough to live on, because for most jobs that are available, they're paying at the old rates. They're paying enough just to, basically, for a half of a grocery trip. And the other thing that that's doing is that there is a brain drain happening, a skill drain, because if you have the capability to work a job that pays any sort of a decent living, you're gonna most likely leave the country so that you can get paid in something that maintains its purchasing value, so that you can send it back to your family to take care of your family. And so there's a huge brain drain going on. And that's, you talk about long-term problems. That is something that isn't solved very, very quickly. That's something that causes generational strain and stress on the system because everybody who can is leaving. Now, the people, the only main thing that keeps people there right now, if you're not aware, the Middle East, they are very, most cultures in the Middle East are one of the highest priorities is hospitality and kind of a community focus, taking care of the family. So I asked about violence because that was one of the things in Venezuela as they've been going through hyperinflation. I believe for one point they were at least I think they were number one, but they were up at the top in terms of murder rate per capita. And so I asked about that because when things start getting really bad, you expect that, what do people do? And looks like culture has a big part to play in that at least locally communities come together, help each other out. And so the people who aren't leaving that have the skills to leave, it's because they've got parents that they're still taking care of. And for one reason or another, everybody can't leave altogether. And so that's one of the things that's causing a lot of stress on families as well is, hey, we have to stay and we don't have the ability to leave because at this point, most people who have had the ability to leave have left because the opportunities are much better to take care of your family. One of the other things that's going on there right now is obviously going to be huge shortages, and this is everything. So shortages on bread, shortages on fuel, shortages on electricity, on water, just everywhere you look, basic necessities, there's a shortage of. And that might seem at first a little bit counterintuitive because you're like, okay, well, if nobody has enough money to buy anything, how is there enough demand to, soak up all the supply? How are there shortages of anything? And, as with anything, problems are very complex. But one of the issues, like I talked about the problems feeding in on themselves when I was talking about the global supply chain issues in my last video. But take, for example, fuel. It's denominated, it's priced globally in dollars. So you can have trillions and trillions of lira. And that just, the more lira you have, the harder it is to get your hands on dollars. And other countries that are selling energy don't want to sell it to Lebanon for lira. They want dollars. And so that's one of the main issues they have. He was telling me, you can see right now, you've got a big tanker that's just sitting on the coast with a bunch of oil. And they're not unloading because they haven't gotten paid. And so everybody's looking, all the citizens are looking, they're like, it's right there. Like, we need it. We can use it. Every day at noon, power outages, just planned rolling blackouts happen in order to conserve energy. And because there's just not enough to maintain the grid for everybody all day long. And so it's really demoralizing to see things like that. Like, that in the world there's enough stuff to go around, but for one reason or another, you yourself can't get your hands on it. It's very stressful and very demoralizing. And he was telling me that if he was it was about noon, he was going to put his son down for a nap, and their blinds, they're like the electric push button blinds, and they have to remember every day before noon happens to go shut the blinds, because if the blackout happens at noon and they haven't remembered to shut their blinds, well, now suddenly there's a ton of light coming into their son's room, and he won't be able to take a nap. And so one thing like that by itself, no big deal, anybody can handle it. But like death by 1,000 cuts, you have that happen just all throughout your life. So many things here and there, they add up, they compound, and they really make life very difficult. Now, the other thing that problems feed in on themselves is there's a bread shortage, and one of the reasons for that is because you need diesel in order to run the generators, and the generators provide the electricity for the factories that are making the bread. And as you have energy shortages, you've got the factories that are trying to output supplies. They can't do it. And so you see shortages pop up in things that rely on something else that has shortages. Now, you might be thinking, why is the grid running off of backup diesel generators? And why is that, such a widespread thing there? Well, it's because the the Minister of Energy there, he's the Minister of Energy for a very long time, owns massive stakes in one or multiple diesel generator companies. And so you talk about the incentive structure there. what do you think is going to happen to the energy grid there? What do you think is going to happen to investment in electricity and grid and maintaining it and cheaper ways to provide electricity and make sure that it's up? No. If you're going to get really rich, if the grid is falling apart and everybody has to use backup diesel generators, then that might be what happens. And so I'm sure, I talk about parallels in other countries. I'm sure you can think of, in every country, at least one person who's in a position of power in the government that also has interest in companies that have been able to do well because of decisions that those policymakers have made. And so chicken or egg, doesn't matter. These things happen together and they get worse together. And finally, one of the other reasons for the shortages is government subsidies. So the government has been subsidizing things, and what that's caused people to do in hard times is buy them at the cheaper rate because the government is paying, let's say, half the price. So you can get it for half the price because you only have to pay what the government hasn't paid. People are taking those things out of the country and then selling them at full price and pocketing the money. And as an individual doing that, it's pretty rational, right? If you're barely scraping by, can't make ends meet, you can buy some gasoline at half price, then take it outside of the country, you're right on the border, sell it for double what you bought it for. You're going to do that because you need the money in order to buy food or water for your family, right? So that's pretty logical. And so the government has been trying to slowly reduce the amount of subsidies to stop some of the resources from leaving the country for a profit. But the more they do that, it's causing people to not be able to afford it because everybody already doesn't have enough money to live and to get by. And so you get into these catch-22 problems where it seems like no matter what you do as a policymaker, you're just making the issue worse. Now, the last question that I asked him about kind of day-to-day life is, there's still people in Lebanon who are very wealthy, although most have already moved their wealth out or left. But there are still some people who are very wealthy. And he said that most of them got wealthy before everything crashed. And I was wondering if there was anybody who visibly has become a lot better off as a result of the inflation. And it, at least from the average person's point of view, it doesn't look that way. But what he did say was, a lot of people are very angry at the people who were able to, who are in the know, well connected and wealthy, and then moved all of their money out of the country before the Ponzi scheme was exposed. And so now I want to get into some of the things that, looking at what life is like, how would you prepare for this if you're concerned something like this might happen in your country? Maybe not to this extent, maybe not hitting number one in the world, but at least high rates of inflation to the point of shortages, and most people can't afford daily life. One of the things very important here is global diversification. Something anybody can do. And I'm not talking about from an unethical standpoint where you're participating in getting wealthy from a Ponzi scheme and then, selling while you're telling people to buy or anything like that. I'm talking about the average person. You've got your wealth. If you hold it all in one country and then everything hits the fan at once, there's a good chance you may not be able to access that wealth. It might be paper wealth and it might be gone. But if you open a bank account in another country, if you open a private vault gold or silver storage account in another country, you can store gold or silver in Singapore, in Switzerland. I probably wouldn't do it in countries with a history of martial law or stealing private property from citizens. I mean, I know in the United States at one point it was the United States took all of the gold from American citizens. They confiscated it. So so in the UK as well. So I wouldn't store things in countries that have a history of confiscating, as a government confiscating possessions of citizens. But there are places in the world that have long histories of lots of freedom and great property rights. And just doing some little simple things like that mean that if something happens where you live, there's always something waiting for you on the other side. There's always somewhere where you can go, and you don't have to worry about getting something out of the country because you've already placed things around the world waiting for you if you need to go there. So that's number one. Number two, and I talked about this in my last video on supply chains, at this point, I think the last year and a half, 2 years has proved to basically everybody it's a pretty good idea to keep some basic supplies on hand. And I know after going through something, like if you're living in Lebanon, after 2 years, you've probably burned through some or all of your emergency supplies, let's say. But at least from the standpoint of preparing for emergencies, it makes sense to have some things on hand. This is especially useful for those who don't have a lot of money and don't have a lot of wealth because number one, you're getting savings on the price per ounce or the actual cost of what you're buying. By buying it in bulk, there's a discount. Number two, if there's inflation in between now, let's say you buy something that lasts you 6 months. And if you were only buying a 1 month supply at a time, if it goes up in price along that time frame, that means that by buying it all, front loading that at the beginning, you're getting a real return on your money. Let's say it goes up 10% in 6 months. The only way to be able to afford that over time would be to put your money that you hadn't used to buy extra into an investment that gives you that return enough to allocate that into those supplies at the end of the time period. And so same exact thing. Apples to apples there. It's, 6 of one, half a dozen of another. You get 10% on your money in an investment and then buy supplies with it, or buy supplies early that end up going up in cost 10%. That's a real return on your money. That's the exact same thing. So diversifying geographically, having some supplies on hand for emergencies, and then finally buying things that historically are resistant to inflation, or that they at least somewhat compensate for inflation. So around the world, throughout history, precious metals, real estate, stocks, these are things that as the value of the currency declines, the priced in the currency, they go up. And even Bitcoin has a place in portfolios, even though very short time frame, historically speaking, there's not a lot of correlation to inflation, but due to the fact that the price has gone up so much, looks like it will continue to do so for at least some time, can provide some protection against a currency's value going down. So bottom line, hyperinflation, not fun. Very demoralizing, very stressful, makes daily living very difficult. Most people get caught off guard by it. Shortages start to pop up. My buddy said that he went in 1 week. There's gasoline shortages, so you have to go wait in line. The line starts 4 hours before the gas station opens. He waited in line for 4 hours, and then guess what? Gas station didn't open. Next day, same thing. Waited in line from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. Same thing. Gas station didn't open. In a week, he waited a total of 13 hours in line for gas, and it took him, I think, 4 or 5 tries before he was able to fill up his tank, because the first time they gave him a quarter of the tank because there were rations. And so just little things like even getting your tank filled up with gas. You never know whether there's going to be a supply there. You never know how much things are going to cost tomorrow. Constantly trying to plan for things, and these problems feed in on themselves. Shortages, price spikes. People don't have enough money. Government hands out more money. That causes more price spikes, more devaluation of the currency. And so anything that can be done to prevent societies from moving closer to that is helpful. And everything that you can do yourself in order to prepare yourself to either escape it before it happens, or be able to escape it once it starts happening, or at least position a portfolio to offset the negative effects of hyperinflation, are things that you can do in order to prepare. I know this was a long video. For anybody who's still sticking around, I really appreciate it. And if you do have a chance or the capability, check out the fundraiser, the nonprofit, to help out people in Lebanon who are really struggling right now. I know that every dollar counts. So as always, really appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.